Humanity stood alone, unbroken. Part 1. The chamber fell silent as Ambassador Rachel finished her presentation. Around her, representatives from 47 alien species sat in their specialized seats, their various forms illuminated by the soft blue light of the Galactic Council chamber. Some breathed methane, others existed as clouds of conscious gas. A few were crystalline beings that communicated through light pulses, but all of them understood the images Rachel had just shown. The swarm was coming. The recordings displayed planets stripped to bare rock, civilizations consumed, billions of lives converted into biological material to fuel the swarm's endless hunger. 17 species had already fallen. Now the swarm had turned toward human space, and it was only 3 star systems away. Rachel stood straight despite her exhaustion. She had spent 6 months traveling to this meeting, 6 months while the swarm crept closer to Earth. "We request military support," she said simply. "Humanity cannot face this threat alone." They spoke first, their crystalline body chiming like bells. Their translated words echoed through the chamber. "The Council has reviewed humanity's military capabilities. You are too new, too primitive. Your weapons would barely slow the swarm." "Then give us better weapons," Rachel replied. "Share your technology, we'll fight with whatever we have." A ripple of light passed through the representative, a telepathic species that looked like floating jellyfish. "The Council must consider all member species," the translation device rendered. "We have run the strategic calculations. Defending human space would require resources from 12 other defensive positions. 3 species would fall while we saved 1. Rachel felt ice form in her stomach. "What are you saying?" The representative, a being of compressed gas contained in a force field, spoke with a voice like wind. "The Council has voted. We will establish a quarantine line at the border of human space. The swarm will be contained there while we evacuate more strategically important systems." "You're abandoning us." Rachel's voice came out flat, emotionless. She couldn't quite process what she was hearing. "We are making a difficult strategic choice," they said. "Human space forms a natural bottleneck. The swarm will take months to consume your systems. That gives us time to reinforce defenses elsewhere. It is regrettable but necessary." 47 colonies, Rachel said quietly. 12 billion people, you're writing us off. "We will evacuate 5 million of your population," they offered. "Your best scientists, genetic diversity samples, cultural artifacts. Humanity will survive even if your civilization falls." Rachel looked around the chamber at the assembled aliens. Species that had lived for thousands of years, that had fought wars before humans climbed down from trees, that had technology that seemed like magic. And they were afraid. They were so afraid of the swarm that they would sacrifice an entire species to slow it down. "No," Rachel said. "Ambassador, please be reasonable." "No," she repeated, louder this time. "If humanity can't save all its people, we won't save any through your charity. We refuse your evacuation offer." Confusion rippled through the chamber. This crystalline body flashed with colors that the translation device struggled to interpret. "You would rather let your entire species die." "We would rather die fighting together than live knowing we abandoned our own people." Rachel gathered her materials, her hands shaking with rage she kept carefully controlled. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. We will face the swarm alone." She turned toward the exit. The massive doors began to open, revealing the corridor beyond. "Ambassador," they called out, "this is irrational. You cannot possibly survive." Rachel paused in the doorway. She looked back at the assembled species, at their alien faces and forms, at the civilization that had seemed so advanced and wise just hours ago. "Maybe not," she said, "but we'll make sure you remember who stood with us, and who didn't." The doors closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling. 6 months later, Mars Station hummed with activity that never stopped. Admiral James stood in the command center, watching display screens that showed the desperate transformation of human space. Every screen told a story of impossible effort and inevitable sacrifice. "Latest report from the Tau evacuation," his aide said, handing him a tablet. 3 million civilians extracted. The mining stations are being converted to weapons platforms as planned. James nodded. The plan was insane, but it was the only plan they had. Humanity had recalled every ship, every soldier, every resource to their own territory. The outer colonies were being systematically evacuated inward, their populations compressed into the inner systems where they could be defended, or at least where they could die together. "How long until the swarm reaches?" he asked. 2 weeks, sir, maybe less." 2 weeks. James looked at the tactical display showing the approaching swarm. The red icons representing enemy forces outnumbered humanity's blue markers by 100 to 1. In conventional warfare, this wouldn't be a battle, it would be an execution. But humanity wasn't planning a conventional war. "Get me Doctor," James said. The scientist appeared on his screen moments later, looking exhausted. Dark circles ringed her eyes, and her hair was tied back in a messy bun. Behind her, James could see the xenobiology lab where teams worked around the clock studying captured swarm specimens. "Admiral," she greeted him, "I was just about to call you. We've found something." "Good news." "Maybe." Sarah pulled up an image of swarm biology, organic structures that looked like nightmares rendered in flesh. The Council's records show they always fought the swarm at long range. Fleet engagements, static defenses, textbook military doctrine. But we've been dissecting these things up close, and they're not as unified as everyone thinks. "Explain." "The swarm adapts fast to any tactic used against it, but it struggles with rapid changes in approach. Every civilization it consumed fought it the same way because the Council taught everyone the same strategy. Same weapons, same formations, same thinking." Sarah's eyes gleamed with something that might have been madness or genius. "We need to fight them differently. Use tactics they've never seen." "Human tactics," James said. "Every war we ever fought against ourselves. Guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, deception, psychological operations, suicide attacks, scorched earth. Things the Council considers barbaric." James smiled grimly. They're about to see just how barbaric humans can be. Over the next 2 weeks became a trap. The small colony population had been evacuated, but the system itself was transformed into a weapons platform. Automated factories pumped out drones designed to swarm rather than fight directly. Mining stations were rigged with fusion bombs but made to look operational. Heat signatures from fake settlements drew attention away from real defensive positions. And everywhere, hidden among the asteroids, hunter-killer units waited. When the swarm arrived, it came like a living tide. Millions of organic ships, grown rather than built, each one a fusion of biology and hunger. The swarm had consumed 17 civilizations. It knew how this would go. The defenders would mass their fleet, fight a brave but futile battle, and die in one glorious last stand. But the human fleet wasn't massing. Most of it wasn't even in the system. The swarm moved toward the obvious targets, the mining stations broadcasting power signatures. When the first bioships docked to feed on the station's energy, the fusion bombs detonated. Dozens of swarm vessels vanished in nuclear fire. The swarm adapted immediately, recognizing the trap. It pulled back from the obvious targets and began sweeping the system methodically. But the asteroid field was dense, and the hunter-killer drones were small and cold. They didn't attack the capital ships. Instead, they targeted the tiny Neuralink creatures that floated between swarm vessels, coordinating their movements. Without coordination, the swarm formation began to falter. Ships collided with each other. Weapons fired at phantom targets. And then the real human fleet appeared, not to engage directly but to harass and retreat, drawing portions of the swarm force into kill zones where more traps waited. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, the swarm had lost its entire vanguard fleet. Thousands of bioships drifted dead in space, their neural networks disrupted beyond recovery. And across the galaxy, on monitoring stations far from the battle, the Galactic Council watched in disbelief. "They won," the representative said, their crystalline body dim with shock. "They survived," the corrected. "That was just the swarm's scouting force." On Mars Station, James studied the sensor readings that showed the swarm's main fleet entering human space. The vanguard had been 1,000 ships. The main fleet was millions. "Get me a channel to the Council's monitoring stations," he ordered. When the connection opened, James didn't bother with pleasantries. He simply transmitted a single message that would be recorded in every history of the war. "We still stand." Then he turned to his command staff. Outside the windows of Mars Station, the red planet glowed beneath them, while beyond it, the darkness of space was beginning to fill with alien ships. The real war was about to begin. "All hands to battle stations," James said quietly. "This is what we trained for. This is why we came home. Earth is behind us and there's nowhere left to run." His second-in-command, a young woman named Tors, looked at him with fear and determination warring in her eyes. "Can we win, sir?" James thought about the overwhelming force headed their way. He thought about the billions of lives depending on them. He thought about humanity standing alone against extinction. "I don't know," he admitted, "but they're going to remember we were here." Part 2. 3 months into the war, Tau burned. Admiral James watched from his command ship as the star itself became a weapon. His orders had been clear, even if they haunted him. Use everything. Sacrifice anything. Make them bleed for every meter of space. "Detonation sequence initiated," the weapons officer reported. Her voice was steady despite what they were about to do. "Solar destabilization in 30 seconds." On the display screen, the swarm fleet filled the system like a cancer. Millions of bioships, all converging on the last human defense stations orbiting Tau's 4th planet. The stations were doomed. Everyone knew it. But the 20,000 defenders had volunteered to stay anyway, buying time for the civilian transports to escape deeper into human territory. 15 seconds. James had studied every war humanity ever fought. He'd read about soldiers who held impossible positions, who died to save others, who made sacrifices that logic. But reading about it and ordering it were different things. 10 seconds, 9, 8. The quantum charges hidden in the star's corona detonated simultaneously. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the star's surface erupted with flares thousands of kilometers high. The destabilized fusion reactions created waves of radiation that swept outward at the speed of light. The swarm fleet had no time to retreat. Bioships by the thousands simply ceased to exist, vaporized by temperatures that matched the star's core. The defense stations died too, along with every human aboard them. But they'd known. They'd all known. "Swarm tendril destroyed," the sensor operator reported quietly. "Estimated enemy losses, 200,000 ships. 200,000 swarm vessels. 20,000 human lives. The mathematics of desperation." "Mark their names," James said. "Every single one, I want them recorded." But even as Tau burned, James knew the truth. The swarm had 50 more tendrils. Humanity had used its most extreme weapon, and it had barely scratched the enemy's total forces. They were winning battles but losing the war through simple attrition. On Earth, the war had transformed society beyond recognition. Rachel walked through underground factories where children assembled drone components with tiny, precise fingers. Elderly volunteers lined up at medical centers to test experimental biological weapons, offering their bodies to science because they had nothing else to give. Artists designed mimetic patterns that confused swarm neural networks. Musicians composed frequencies that disrupted bioship navigation. Production is up 15%, the factory supervisor reported, following Rachel through the facility. We're meeting quota on everything except antimatter containment units. Then we build more containment facilities, Rachel said. She paused to watch a girl, maybe 10 years old, soldering circuits with focused concentration. How many hours is she working? 8, same as everyone else. The children insisted on contributing. Rachel knelt down next to the girl. What's your name? Maya. The girl didn't look up from her work. My parents died at. I'm building the drones that will kill the things that killed them. There were no words adequate for that. Rachel simply nodded and moved on. Every person on Earth had a similar story now. The swarm had taken something from everyone, and everyone wanted revenge. In the xenobiology labs deep beneath Antarctica, Dr. Sarah made the breakthrough that might change everything. She'd been studying swarm neural structures for months, dissecting the specimens captured at, mapping the organic networks that allowed the swarm to function as a unified entity. It's not one consciousness, she explained to the assembled military commanders via video link. It's more like a computer network, millions of individual nodes connected through quantum-entangled neural tissue. The larger nodes coordinate the smaller ones. We knew it was a hive mind, General Torres said from Mars Station. What's new? The Council never figured out the network topology. They studied the swarm at a distance, through sensors and long-range analysis. But we've been fighting at knife-fighting range, and we've captured intact neural tissue. Sarah pulled up a holographic diagram. The network has critical nodes like servers coordinating everything. If we could target those nodes specifically, inject a disruption signal, we could break the network, James finished. Turn the unified swarm into millions of individual organisms without coordination. Theoretically, yes, but it would require direct injection into a primary nexus node. We'd have to penetrate deep into swarm-controlled space, find one of the major coordination centers, and physically deliver the virus. The military officers on the call looked at each other. No one needed to say it. That was a suicide mission. No ship could fight that deep into enemy territory and return. How long to develop the virus? James asked. 3 months, maybe 4. You have 2. The swarm will reach Jupiter in 90 days. The call ended and Sarah returned to her work. 2 months to create a weapon that might save humanity. No pressure. 60 days later, Jupiter's moons became a battlefield. The gas giant's gravity made it a natural, and humanity had fortified every moon, every asteroid, every piece of rock larger than a car. The defense coordinator on Ganymede sent her final report to Earth just before the swarm hit. We are ready. They will not take this system easily. They didn't. The battle for Jupiter lasted 3 weeks. Europa's ice shattered under relativistic impacts, releasing subsurface oceans into space where they froze instantly, creating billions of new obstacles. Io's volcanism was weaponized, seeding the battle space with superheated debris. Ganymede's defense platforms fired until their ammunition was gone, then used their reactors as bombs. When it was over, Jupiter's moons were gone, their orbits filled with debris fields that would take centuries to settle. But the swarm forces had been decimated again. They'd expected resistance. They hadn't expected humans to destroy their own moons to create defensive advantages. Mars fell next. Admiral relocated to Earth's orbital stations, watching the red planet disappear behind a swarm of bioships. Mars's last transmission was simple. We made them pay. The human defenders had rigged the entire planet with seismic charges. When the swarm landed to harvest biomass, they triggered a cascading tectonic collapse. Mars didn't explode, but its surface became an earthquake zone that would take centuries to stabilize. Now Earth itself was under threat. The swarm surrounded the planet, building up forces for the final assault. James stood in the command center, looking at holographic displays showing the orbital defenses. Thousands of weapons platforms, millions of drones, every defensive system humanity could build. It wouldn't be enough. Evacuation status, he asked. 95% of the civilian population is on Luna or in deep space habitats, Torres reported. We can't save everyone, sir. There's not enough transport capacity. 5%. That was still 600 million people who couldn't be evacuated. 600 million who would die when the swarm came down. Unless the planet itself became a weapon. James made the call to Rachel on Luna. We need to discuss Earth's final defense. They spoke for hours, arguing about moral lines and practical necessities. In the end, the mathematics were simple. Earth could be a prize for the swarm, adding billions of tons of biomass to their forces. Or Earth could be humanity's biggest bomb. Are you sure about this? Rachel asked. Her face on the screen looked older than it had a year ago. They all did. No, James admitted, but I'm sure we can't let them have it. If we're losing Earth anyway, let's make it cost them everything. The word went out. Everyone still on Earth would have 72 hours to reach evacuation points. After that, the planet would be rigged to die. Fusion bombs in the mantle, atmosphere igniters in the stratosphere, nano-weapon clouds in the oceans, biological weapons in the soil. Everything humanity had ever created to destroy itself, all deployed at once. The remaining population moved in one final exodus. Children carried the elderly. Strangers became families. People brought photos, a handful of soil, seeds from gardens, anything to remember home. The news broadcasts showed images that would haunt history, millions of people leaving Earth knowing they'd never return. Maya, the 10-year-old from the factory, boarded a transport with an urn containing her parents' ashes. I wanted to bury them here, she said to the volunteer helping her aboard. But I guess the whole planet will be their grave now. 60 hours later, the swarm descended. Millions of bioships entered Earth's atmosphere, spreading across the surface to harvest the biomass of a living world. They'd done this 17 times before. They knew exactly how it would go. From Luna, humanity watched their one last time. The blue marble that had given birth to their species, that held every monument and memory of human history. Send them our message, James ordered. Rachel's voice broadcast on all frequencies, speaking to the swarm even though no one knew if it could understand. You wanted Earth, take it. The detonation was simultaneous across the entire planet. Fusion fire erupted from underground charges. The atmosphere ignited, oxygen becoming flame. Oceans boiled away in seconds. The planet's surface became a hell that burned everything organic, swarm, and human artifacts alike. 4 billion swarm organisms died instantly. 3 major neural nexus nodes, rare and irreplaceable, ceased to exist. Earth became a radioactive tomb, its surface molten, its atmosphere stripped away. And across the galaxy, the Galactic Council watched in horror. Humanity had destroyed their own rather than let it fall. The strategic implications were staggering. If humans would do that to Earth, what wouldn't they do? On Luna, in a chamber carved from bare rock, humanity's survivors watched the planet burn. Many wept. Others sat in stunned silence. Some felt a grim satisfaction. They'd made the swarm pay a price that might never be recovered. Sarah approached James in the aftermath. The viral weapon is ready, she said quietly. We can deploy whenever you give the word. James looked at the glowing ember that had been Earth. Then it's time to make them regret they ever came to our space. Prepare Operation Spear. Part 3. Operation Spear began with 500 ships, the remnants of humanity's shattered fleet. Most had battle scars, patched hull breaches, and systems held together by improvisation and prayer. Every vessel was loaded with antimatter, conventional weapons, and one precious cargo, Sarah's viral weapon, the code breaker that might shatter the swarm's neural network forever. Admiral James stood on the bridge of the carrier Defiant, watching his fleet assemble in Luna's shadow. Earth's glowing remains cast an eerie red light across their hulls. Every crew member had volunteered. Every crew member knew the survival probability was 0%. Final crew checks complete, Torres reported. She'd volunteered to serve as his second-in-command one last time. All ships report ready for departure. Good. James opened a fleet-wide channel. 500 ships, 15,000 personnel waiting for his words. He kept them simple. We've lost billions of our people. The galaxy abandoned us and we've fought alone. Today we stop fighting to survive. Today we fight to win. We're going to punch straight into the swarm's heart and we're going to kill it. Not because it's possible, because it's necessary. He paused, looking at the faces on his screen. Young and old, military and civilian volunteers, people from every corner of what remained of humanity. The swarm thinks it knows us. It thinks we're prey. Let's teach it what humans do to predators. The fleet launched in formation, a spear of metal and fury aimed at the darkness where the swarm's main concentration lay. Behind them on Luna, Rachel watched the ships disappear. She was crying, something she hadn't allowed herself to do since the war began. Those ships carried humanity's last hope and its best people. "Come back," she whispered, knowing they wouldn't. The swarm detected the human fleet within hours. It responded exactly as Sarah had predicted, treating the attack as a standard military engagement. Swarm forces moved to intercept, forming defensive formations that had worked against 17 previous civilizations. But Operation Spear wasn't a standard attack. The human fleet didn't slow down to engage. It accelerated, burning through fuel reserves at rates no sane commander would authorize. When swarm forces moved to intercept, the humans simply rammed through them, taking losses but never stopping. "Contact in Sector 4, the weapons officer reported. "Heavy swarm concentration ahead." "All ships maintain formation," James ordered. "We don't stop, not for anything." The carrier shuddered as it took fire. Hull breaches appeared on the damage display. 3 escort frigates vanished in explosions of antimatter, but the fleet kept moving forward, like a bullet that couldn't be stopped. Then something unexpected happened. A ship appeared on sensors, but it wasn't human and it wasn't swarm. The IFF signature identified it as the young species that had been humanity's contemporaries in the Council. Then another appeared. Then a dozen. "Incoming transmission," Torres said, surprise evident in her voice. Appeared on screen, its gaseous form swirling within its containment field. "Human fleet, this is Envoy. We couldn't watch anymore. If you fight alone, we choose to fight with you." James felt something he hadn't felt in months: hope. "Envoy, this is a one-way mission. We're not coming back." "Neither are we," the replied. "But perhaps we can die making a difference instead of living with shame." The combined fleet pushed deeper into swarm space. The casualties mounted exponentially. 50 ships gone. 100, 200. But the survivors kept moving, kept fighting, kept burning forward. They fought with a desperation the swarm had never encountered, a willingness to sacrifice everything that the organism's understanding. Human ships with breached hulls continued fighting, crews working in vacuum suits as their vessels vented atmosphere. When engines failed, ships detonated their reactors to clear paths for others. Damaged vessels deliberately collided with swarm capital ships, crews broadcasting defiant messages until the moment of impact. They fought with equal determination, their ships designed for defense now used as battering rams. They'd spent 1,000 years as the Council's smallest species, always protected, never tested. Now they discovered what they could become. Sarah worked in the Defiance lab as the ship shook around her. Her job was simple: keep the viral weapon intact until they reached a primary nexus node. Everything else was someone else's problem. She'd spent 6 months creating this weapon, understanding the swarm's biology better than anyone. She knew it would work. She also knew she'd never see if it did. "We're approaching the target zone," James announced over the ship's intercom. "All non-essential personnel to escape pods." Sarah laughed bitterly. There were no escape pods anymore. They'd been destroyed hours ago. Everyone left on the ship was essential because everyone left was willing to die. The Nexus node appeared on sensors, a massive living moon that coordinated 17 swarm tendrils across human space. It was surrounded by defensive bioships so thick they looked like a solid wall. Only 37 vessels remained in the attack fleet. "All power to forward weapons," James ordered. "Everyone else follow our vector. We're going through." The Defiant accelerated one final time, burning its reactor beyond safety limits. The ship's hull glowed with heat. Alarms screamed warnings about imminent reactor breach. James ignored them all, guiding the carrier toward the Nexus on manual control because the computer kept trying to prevent what it considered suicide. Swarm defenses tore through the fleet's remnants. Ships exploded in beautiful cascades of colored gas. Human vessels broke apart, their crews dead but their momentum carrying debris forward. Torres died at her station when a swarm weapon pierced the bridge, her last action ensuring the navigation system stayed locked on target. James felt the ship dying around him. Life support had failed. Half the bridge crew was dead. He was piloting on manual, barely conscious from oxygen deprivation, his vision narrowing to a tunnel focused on the Nexus node growing larger on his screen. "Sarah," he managed to say into the intercom, not knowing if she could hear, "get ready." In the lab, Sarah loaded the viral weapon into the torpedo tubes. Her hands were steady despite everything. This was what she trained for. This was the moment that would determine if humanity survived or became extinct. The Defiant hit the Nexus at relativistic speed. The impact was violent enough to crack the living moon's surface. As the carrier broke apart, its torpedo tubes fired automatically, driving the viral payload deep into the Nexus's neural tissue. James' last transmission, broadcast on all frequencies, was simple. "Terra remembers, Terra endures, Terra stands unbroken." Then the Defiant exploded, taking a chunk of the Nexus with it. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the virus activated, spreading through the swarm's quantum-entangled neural network like fire through dry paper. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The unified swarm consciousness shattered into trillions of individual organisms without purpose or direction. Across human space, swarm fleets simply stopped. Bioships collided with each other or continued on ballistic trajectories into empty space. The coordination that made them deadly vanished. They became nothing more than mindless biology, attacking each other in confusion. On Luna, Rachel stood in the command center surrounded by display screens showing the same thing. The swarm was dead. Not destroyed, but broken. Its network was gone, its consciousness fragmented, its threat ended. The room erupted in cheers, but Rachel stood silent. They'd won. Humanity had survived, but the cost was almost incomprehensible. Earth was a radioactive wasteland. 11 billion people were dead. 47 colonies were destroyed. The fleet was gone. James was gone. Sarah was gone. All those brave souls who'd fought their way into the swarm's heart were gone. "Send word to all survivors," she said quietly. "The war is over. We won." Days later, the Galactic Council's representatives arrived at Luna. They came in person this time, dozens of species cramming into a makeshift chamber carved from lunar rock. Rachel met them wearing a vacuum suit stained with the grime of war, her face bearing scars from a swarm boarding action she'd survived months ago. They spoke first, their crystalline body dimmed with what might have been shame. "Humanity, we come offering reparations, technology, assistance in rebuilding, full military alliance, restoration of Earth." "Stop," Rachel said. The word cut through the chamber like a blade. "I'll tell you what's going to happen. Humanity will return to the Council, but not as supplicants. We're equals now, proven equals. She walked to a holographic display showing Earth's glowing remains. That quarantine doctrine that sacrificed us, abolished. No species ever gets abandoned for strategic expedience again. The Council establishes a joint military command, and humanity leads it because we know how to fight extinction wars. You share technology freely because your hoarding nearly doomed the galaxy. Rachel turned back to the assembled aliens. And most importantly, this moon becomes a memorial. Every name of every human who died gets carved into lunar bedrock, visible from space. So the galaxy never forgets the price of standing alone. The Council agreed to every term. They had no choice. Humanity had done what they couldn't, killed the swarm. But more than that, the aliens recognized what humanity represented, a mirror showing them their own failures. 50 years later, Ambassador Maya stood before the memorial, addressing graduating cadets from across the galaxy. She was the little girl who'd built drones in an underground factory, who'd lost her parents who'd evacuated Earth with their ashes. Now she represented humanity to the stars. The swarm taught us something, she told the assembled cadets, their various forms gathered in a crowd that represented 30 different species. Evil exists, extinction is possible, safety is an illusion, but so is helplessness. She gestured to the memorial, where trillions of names were carved into the lunar surface. From space, the memorial was visible as a pattern that could be seen from Earth's orbit. The glowing planet behind Luna had healed somewhat, its surface still but showing signs of life returning. We stood alone because we had to. We remained unbroken because we chose to. And now no species will ever stand alone again because humanity remembers what that costs. Maya paused, looking at the young faces before her. You come here to learn from us, but remember this, we're not teaching you how to be strong. We're teaching you how to refuse to be weak. There's a difference. After the ceremony, Maya walked the memorial's paths with a child named Whisper. The young being floated beside her, reading names carved in stone with sensors humans couldn't perceive. Why do humans remember the dead so much? Whisper asked. Our people celebrate those who live. Maya knelt down, touching a name on the wall, Admiral James. Because they're the reason we get to live. Every person here bought our future with their life. We remember them so we never waste what they gave us. They stood together in silence, human and alien, looking up at Earth rising over Luna's horizon. The planet was wounded but healing. The scars would never fully disappear, but life was returning. Humanity had reclaimed there from nuclear fire through sheer determination and generations of effort. In orbit above, the Galactic Defense Academy trained cadets in human tactics, teaching them creativity, adaptability, and the refusal to accept defeat. Humanity had become the Council's rapid response force, the species other civilizations called when extinction threatened. They'd turned their trauma into purpose, their loss into strength. Maya thought about her parents sometimes, about the little girl she'd been who assembled drones with tiny fingers. That girl had grown into a woman who represented humanity's future. Her parents would have been proud. Come on, she said to Whisper. I'll show you the Hall of Heroes. That's where we remember the ones who taught us what it means to survive. As they walked away, the memorial stood eternal behind them, billions of names carved in stone under the light of a healing Earth. Humanity stood alone once. Humanity remained unbroken, and in their defiance, they taught the galaxy what survival truly meant. The war was over, the long peace had begun, and humanity would never forget the price they paid for it.